The Celtics may have taken a tough loss against the Pistons, but imagine what this team could be with Jayson Tatum back. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, and the Boston Celtics have had a really surprising and fun season. And by surprising, I mean in the best way possible. I thought there was a chance going into this season that they would be a playoff team, but I didn't necessarily think that they would be where they are because of the fact primarily that Jayson Tatum was out with an injury. And I mentioned this on last week's Celtics episode too, when I talked about the state of the Boston Celtics and how they had traded away some key pieces from their championship run in 2023, including Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday. So it really felt like it was going to be a rebuilding season primarily for the Celtics overall. Now, I don't mean rebuilding like bottom of the barrel. I just mean more of new group, trying to find their chemistry and working with players who haven't really been on this team. And this team has truly been a pleasant surprise. And a lot of players have really stepped up. And they did play against the Pistons last night, who, keep in mind, are the top team in the East right now. They are currently 31-10, sit atop the NBA Eastern Conference. The Celtics are 5.5 games back in second place in the Eastern Conference with a record of 26-16. So those two teams aren't that far apart. Obviously, the Celtics are going to have to go on a bit of a win streak if they want to catch the Pistons at this point, because we are, as crazy as it sounds, halfway through the season already. It goes by so fast. I can't believe we're already at the halfway point of the regular season, but it's super exciting. And with where the Celtics are right now, they are in a prime position to make a run. And last night's game, even though the Celtics lost, it was super encouraging. They fell by 1 point, 104-103, against the current best team in the East without their best player. How does that not make you feel optimistic? That's got to give you hope that, oh, if they had Jayson Tatum here healthy to be able to play, then this could have been a very different story. And I take that as very optimistic and very positive. So that was a promising sign. So for the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, as always, stepping up, led the way with a double-double of 32 points, 11 rebounds in that game last night. And then Payton Pritchard put up 17 points, Sam Hauser with 16. And then from a starter perspective, Neemias Queta scored 10 points and Derrick White had just 4 points. But Luka Garza stepped up in double digits off the bench with 10 points, Anthony Simons with 9, and then Baylor Shireman and Jordan Walsh each contributed. Baylor Shireman played 15 minutes and scored 3 points. Jordan Walsh played 16 minutes and scored 2 points. So that was the exact breakdown when it came to points from last night. Hugo Gonzalez also played a couple minutes but didn't score. So that was the breakdown from that game, with Jaylen Brown being the primary contributor. He contributes in all facets of the game, rebounding, shooting, dominating the boards, and just being that player that truly is the face of the franchise right now, currently with Tatum out. And there were a lot of concerns going into this season about whether Jaylen was going to be able to play that role. And he certainly exceeded in that role and has been able to really put this team on his back in multiple occasions. We saw in the fourth quarter of last night's game, he truly stepped up a lot for his teammates. And that's what a leader does. And when he won finals MVP in 2023, a lot of people were like, wow, I can't believe Tatum didn't win it. But you know what? Jaylen steps up when it matters. And this game showed that he kept this Celtics team in it late. And that was a key asset to this game. He did miss a bucket at the end of the game that ultimately led to the Celtics falling by 1. But that was a shot that legitimately could have gone either way. It was a good look, just missed a potential game-winning jumper that kind of went in and out. So not much else he really could have done there. He did have a good look. It wasn't a bad shot. It just didn't fall. So the Celtics lost by 1, but the execution was definitely there. Just definitely disappointing that he couldn't get the shot to fall. But they stayed in it, and it truly had playoff vibes. That game to me felt like a playoff game. And that's really exciting to me because I think about the idea of the playoffs. And it's like, wow, yeah, I mean, the Celtics versus the Pistons has a really good chance of happening down the road in the postseason. So keep an eye on these two teams moving forward down the stretch. But it was a lot of back and forth in this game last night. The game featured 9 lead changes and 14 ties over the 48 minutes. It was definitely a defensive struggle for most of the night because the Pistons went 43% shooting and the Celtics 39% shooting. Both couldn't sustain a lot of offensive momentum. So that was kind of a story of the game, was that both defenses were kind of locked in and preventing the other team from getting good shots off. So that helped lead the Pistons to the victory, but the Celtics defense was very much locked in as well. Detroit did kind of take control late in the game with back-to-back buckets to take a 5-point lead with 1:37 remaining in regulation. But like I mentioned about Jaylen Brown before, he is very motivated, hates losing, and just very much is resilient. And he didn't give in that game, pulling the team to within 1 with 2 straight buckets. So the Celtics did get 3 consecutive stops after that to give them a chance to tie with 4.1 seconds left. But a well-guarded jumper by Jaylen failed to connect. So ultimately, the Celtics fell for the 3rd time this season against the Pistons. Again, don't be super alarmed by that because they've played competitive games and they haven't had Jayson Tatum. So that's another big takeaway. Payton Pritchard actually had a 1-game absence. He was out for a game with some pain, so then he came back and he bounced back pretty well. And the story of the game for the Pistons, of course, has to be Cade Cunningham, who had a double-double with 16 points and 14 assists, while Tobias Harris also added 25 points for them to lead the Pistons in scoring during their victory. This is now a scenario in which I'm excited to see the Celtics compete against this Pistons team when fully healthy. This is a team where I really feel like the Celtics are evenly matched with them, if not even better, when they're healthy. And that's why only losing by 1 point, even though it is a bummer that they fell in this game, it still says a lot about the ability level of this team when it is at its best. And when it's at its best, I don't think this is a Celtics team that people are going to want to face. And this was just yet another game that proved that. Foul trouble did force the Celtics into unusual lineup looks in the first half of this game. I will say is one of the biggest things I picked up on from this. Luka Garza had been rock solid in the Celtics rotation over the past 3 weeks, but his defensive struggles definitely shine through in this game last night, I would say. The big man ended up picking up 4 fouls in just 3 first-half minutes, forcing some unusual lineup combinations in the second quarter by Joe Mazzulla. Xavier Tillman ended up seeing his first non-garbage time minutes since November 30th. I mean, let's just face it, he always comes in late in the game when the Celtics have secured a win or secured a loss for the worst in a blowout. But this was the first time he actually played some important minutes since November. And Baylor Shireman also saw some minutes at center as Joe Mazzulla ended up going with a small lineup for a few minutes with his team's offense struggling. Neemias Queta also was able to take on a heavier minutes load, but Garza ended up making an impact in the second half with 10 points in his limited minutes. But his absence in the second quarter was costly, with the Celtics ultimately getting outscored 33-22 in that period. So got to try to limit the fouls and stay in control of that, because it kind of forces Joe to use odd rotations, and that's not a huge recipe for success. So got to try to not get into foul trouble early was one of the biggest things I took away from this game. Sam Hauser is an interesting player. He's had an overall good season so far for the Celtics team this year, and he's a guy who certainly does contribute. And when he is on, and he's a guy who you don't want to see at his best, because he can be hot, but then when he goes cold, it's frustrating, and he goes very cold. In this game, he stayed hot, but ended up disappearing late in the game. He was having a legendary game on Saturday in which he came off of flirting with Celtics history from 3-point range in the team's win over the Hawks. That was a very commanding win. He continued his momentum against a far tougher defense in the Pistons. So I would be interested in seeing how he adapts to that if he was going to be able to maintain that same level of success against this Pistons team. He ended up taking advantage of the Pistons packing the paint, and he did find a lot of open looks coming off the pick and roll in this game on second chance opportunities. He ended up knocking down 4 of his 7 threes in the loss and is now shooting 46% in the month of January. All of his damage came early, though, as he did not attempt a shot in 7 fourth quarter minutes. So I definitely would like to see him be able to stay more consistent across the board for the entirety of the game, and that in the second half, if he had a good first half, he's able to maintain that in the second half. So that's something I definitely will say about Sam Hauser. But if he can continue to stay cooking from 3, that's going to be massive for this Celtics team, especially if he's a guy who does start coming off the bench more. Then he's going to be key when it comes to this makeup overall of what the Celtics team is trying to do moving forward. So if he can continue to stay hot from 3-point range, I'm going to be looking at that as a big key to this team's potential success. Celtics did lose the turnover battle in costly fashion in this game. The Celtics are actually the best team in basketball right now at taking care of the ball, but they were forced into a lot of mistakes early against this really tough Pistons defense. And that was a little bit to be expected because when you are facing a really competitive defense like that, it is natural that you may make those types of mistakes because if that defense is really aggressive and has a good strategy and they're forcing those turnovers on you, it does make sense that that would happen, but got to take better care of the basketball. The Celtics piled up 9 first half turnovers compared to just 2 for the Pistons, helping dig Boston's offense into a very early hole with a lackluster 51 points. It was kind of a messy first half overall. The Celtics offense did break through, though, in the third quarter and ended up cleaning up some mistakes, but a massive difference in the points off turnovers in the Pistons' favor ended up being the difference in the game because the Pistons scored 19 points off of turnovers compared to the Celtics 6. So that is a difference maker. You've got to be able to capitalize on the other team's mistakes, and that's something that the Pistons were doing a lot better of in this game than the Celtics were doing. So that's something that I'm going to be eyeing moving forward. Protect the basketball and capitalize on the other team's mistakes. And that's something that is fixable and that the Celtics can hopefully be prepared for if they do face the Pistons in the postseason. But that was rough to watch because they just were not able to capitalize like the Pistons were. And that ended up ultimately being the biggest difference. Another player who I absolutely adore, by the way, who is one of my favorite players on the Celtics team is Derrick White. I truly feel like he's just such a difference maker for this team. We love Derrick White. He loves playing in Boston, and it's just great to see. But he had a really bad shooting night. And everybody has bad shooting nights, so I'm not going to fault him for this too much. But he essentially had his right drive taken away for most of the night by this Pistons defense, and it really left him struggling to find any kind of rhythm. He just could not get going. He missed 10 of his 11 shots, including all 6 of his 3-point attempts. He still had a strong night on the glass and with the pass, but the disappearance of a normally reliable scoring option for him created a big challenge for the Celtics offense as a whole, and it was making it really challenging for them to match up against the Pistons' size and physicality. So again, when I bring up Derrick White, obviously it wasn't there for him offensively, but because he still contributed with his rebounds and assists, it felt like he still was contributing on the stat sheet, which he definitely was. But him not being able to shoot at a high level last night definitely hurt this Celtics team. He had 4 points in the game to go along with 9 rebounds and 5 assists. So obviously he was still making a difference, and that's what good players do. Even if they're off in one area of their game one night, they're still able to contribute in other ways. So that's what I like about D-White is that he's always still finding ways to contribute, but his shooting being off in the game against the Pistons certainly hurt the Celtics. Just a quick reminder that you can subscribe to Boston Balling on any podcast platform, including YouTube. I am here Monday through Thursday talking about Boston sports, Patriots, Celtics, Bruins, Red Sox, you name it. Also featuring some fun guests along the way. For example, on Thursday this week, I will be speaking with Bruins reporter Casey Hudson of Nesson, who does a really good job covering both the Bruins and women's hockey on Nesson, so she should be a fun guest, as well as next week, I will be bringing in a special guest from the women's hockey scene in Boston as well. This time, somebody who was a player both in college and pro in Boston. So you won't want to miss those. So make sure that you subscribe to this show on any podcast platform to continue tuning in and consuming the content. The Celtics are having a very exciting season, and nobody can deny the fact that they are a dangerous team. If we are being realistic right now, are there any teams that want to face a fully healthy Celtics team in the playoffs? I'm going to guess no. The Celtics, like I mentioned before, are currently 5.5 games behind the Pistons and are second place in the East right now. But the Knicks are 25-18, just a game and a half behind Boston in third in the East. So that's notable. And the Raptors, as of right now, are only a half game behind the Knicks at 25-19. So those teams are all kind of neck and neck. Obviously, the Pistons are a good distance ahead with their 31-10 record. It will take the Celtics going on a win streak to catch them. But with the Knicks and the Raptors not being far behind, this could be an interesting second half of the season. And if you think about the Celtics holding their own and being 10 games above 500 right now, and they don't have Jayson Tatum, imagine what this team could be with him back. Now, there are teams that still concern me. The Pistons are very, very good. And while they have a lot of talent on that team, the Celtics do have an edge when it comes to playoff experience over them as a whole. And the core of what that Celtics team brings to the table is that experience. And a lot of people sometimes feel like experience isn't important, but it absolutely is. Experience is huge going into the playoffs. If your team has had exposure to being in that playoff environment and other teams haven't as much, that could be a huge difference maker for your team. That could give your team the edge. Why do you think LeBron always excelled when he was on the postseason stage? Even if his team wasn't necessarily the best in the regular season, even with the Lakers, and if they just squeezed into the playoffs, they always managed to be a team that you had to be a little bit worried about because they had LeBron there. LeBron, who is so accomplished and has seen the playoffs so many times. It's so familiar to him, like the back of his hand. So you want guys like that on your team. And Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, even though they are still relatively young, have already been to the playoffs multiple times in their career. So those are other guys who you can look at and say, yeah, those guys have playoff experience. So I would give them the edge over the Pistons in that way. The Knicks are definitely a team that concerned me for the Celtics. They were the team that eliminated the Celtics in the East last season. And yes, Jayson Tatum got hurt during that series at the end of it, but the Knicks were already ahead in that series prior to Tatum getting injured. So it's hard to really say the Celtics would have won that series had Tatum not been hurt, because the reality at the end of the day is that the chances of them winning that series were not looking great, even with him. So I would be a little bit concerned about the Knicks. They came in hot in the playoffs last year. They, in the first 2 games against the Celtics in that series, came from behind to win those games because the Celtics really struggled to close out games last year. That's something that I'm really looking at this year. If this team is going to make a serious playoff push, is how serious are they about being able to close out games effectively? Because that ended up being their Achilles heel in 2025 in that postseason, not being able to close out games in the fourth quarter. The Knicks started hitting their shots. The Celtics started missing theirs. And if there's any repeat of that, then the Knicks are definitely a team to be concerned about. And the Knicks have to stay healthy too, though. Jalen Brunson has been off and on, hasn't particularly been super healthy for the entirety of this season. So he's going to be key for this Knicks team. He needs to be healthy if they are going to be taken seriously as a deep playoff threat. But they are definitely a team that I would worry about, no doubt about it. The 76ers, Magic, and Cavs are after that in 5th, 6th, and 7th place, respectively, behind the Raptors. And then in 8th is the Heat, 9th is the Bulls, and 10th is the Hawks. So those teams are teams that potentially could theoretically place the Celtics in the playoffs. Now, the Bucks, Hornets, Nets, Wizards, and Pacers are all at 11 through 15. The Bucks are 18 and 24, Hornets 16 and 27, Nets 12 and 29, Wizards 10 and 32, and Pacers 10 and 34. So those teams are pulling up the rear. So we don't necessarily have to be worried about those teams, but if there are teams in there that I could see making a sneaky good run that are lower down, the Cavs are definitely not a team to rule out. I mean, they were the best team in the East last season, and they aren't having as good of a season now. But if that team gets hot, I could see them making a run. This is something that if I am the Celtics, I am keeping an eye on and I am looking out for, because you have a Cavs team that is still stacked with talent. And if that team makes it to the playoffs, that's a team I would not want to face. The Heat are always an interesting one. They're 22 and 21 right now in 8th place in the East. And obviously, a lot of this could still change. While we are already halfway through the season, we're also only halfway through the season. So a lot can still change in this second half stretch. But if the Heat make the playoffs, they are always a team that seem to give other teams problems. And they are a team that does also have that playoff experience. So if I am another team and I am looking to have to play Miami in the playoffs, I am preparing myself for that, because Eric Spoelstra is a great coach. He always prepares that team really well, and the Celtics have struggled against them in the playoffs. So that's another team to keep an eye on. So the Eastern Conference right now does feel wide open, but if the Celtics do get a healthy Jayson Tatum back, I would imagine that they should be a team that is considered a big threat to make a deep playoff run. Now, there's a lot of keys to that, because the only answer isn't just getting Jayson Tatum back. Obviously, everybody needs to step up and continue to play at a high level. Jaylen Brown still needs to play at a high level, but there is going to be a lot of pressure taken off of him when Tatum comes back, because right now he is being looked at and expected to be the guy. He has to be the guy that gets the job done. He has to be the guy that goes out there and basically pulls the weight that Tatum would also be pulling if he was out there. Now, if Tatum comes back and they can split that duty again, that's ideal for Jaylen, because then it's not all on him. So that's a little bit reassuring for him. It's going to take some of the pressure off, but also at the same time, he is going to have to be on his A game. There is no ignoring that. It just is what it is. And so is everybody else. Lots of players are going to have to step up. Hauser and Pritchard especially are key assets to this team. Those guys are going to have to be locked and loaded and ready to go moving forward in order for this team to make a deep playoff push. I'm also looking at the likes of Jordan Walsh, Luka Garza, guys who come off the bench and maybe don't always play the most minutes on this team, but play impactful minutes when they're out there. Those guys in particular. Anthony Simons right now in the conversation for 6th man of the year, a guy who as of late has really been on fire. He, to me, is going to be a massive difference maker for this team. So the biggest thing that I'm looking at moving forward is everybody's still going to have to do their job. And when Tatum does come back, everybody's going to have to slot him in, but still be able to do their job at a high level, still be able to contribute offensively and defensively. They have to minimize the turnovers and the mistakes, because the best teams in basketball are not going to be able to be forgiving. You are not going to be able to get away with making those types of mistakes if you want to beat the best of the best. It always stands to truth, that statement. You have to beat the best to be the best. And I truly do believe that the Celtics could be the best. They definitely have that in them. And it's really exciting to see this group of talent that they have on this team. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where things go from here. Last night's game obviously was disappointing, but the Celtics' upcoming schedule is one to certainly keep an eye on to allow them to hopefully go on a little winning streak. They have the Pacers tomorrow night and then the Nets on Friday night, both teams that are in the bottom for the Eastern Conference, so they have to take advantage of beating teams like that. Absolutely have to. One thing that bothers me about this Celtics team that they tend to do sometimes is that they take their competition a little too lightly when they are playing teams like that and teams that clearly aren't as good as them, and they tend to sleep on those teams a little bit. So have to capitalize on beating teams like the Pacers and the Nets. Then they play the Bulls. They have a back-to-back. They play Friday and Saturday night. Friday at 7:30 against the Nets, and then Saturday at 8 against the Bulls. Then they play the Blazers at home the following Monday, and then the Hawks at home. So interesting schedule upcoming here moving forward, but they have to be able to pick up these wins. They have to get key wins. They go back to the West Coast in mid-February. They face the Warriors on February 19th, and then pencil in the Lakers at 6:30 p.m. on February 22nd, and then they have the Suns and Nuggets on that trip too. So that could be a tough 4-game stretch there. It's always tough in general when you go to the West Coast, but they're playing some tough teams on that trip. So until then, got to definitely accumulate wins. And this team is definitely built to be able to win. It's just a matter of everybody executing. And Joe Mazzulla, there has been a lot of debate over him and whether he's the coach to get the job done. I truly do feel like he is. He is a guy who I would trust to lead this team. He's already led this team to a championship. He knows these guys. He knows how to utilize guys. I do sometimes question his rotations. Again, I did talk about earlier on in the show how foul trouble in last night's game early on kind of forced him to change up his rotations a little bit. But in general, sometimes I'm like, well, that's an interesting rotation that he has out there. But overall, as a coach, I do trust his ability to be somebody who can lead this team to success down the road. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. As a Celtics fan, you have to be excited about where this team is headed right now. They are really much riding a high, and they are very much in a state of surprising people in a good way. And while they took a while to get going this season, they really are showing that they didn't take a step back at all from missing Jayson Tatum. And that's what's pretty crazy about all of this, because if you think about the fact that there's opportunity still to improve at the trade deadline, and the fact that if they are healthy and they're able to stay healthy, they could hang with anybody, as they've shown. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that all plays out. But thank you so much for tuning in to Boston Balling. I'm really excited to continue to bring you exciting content, talking about all the different Boston sports teams and everything that they are doing. It's a long basketball season, so there are still so many games to go. I know every loss feels like a huge letdown and a huge disappointment, but sometimes I have to remind myself, like, listen, Gabby, there are so many games. They play like 3 or 4 games a week, so let's just relax here. And while I was annoyed at the way that last night's game ended, because I felt like they had that game, I still understood it's just one game. They lost by 1, and they didn't have Jayson Tatum. So lots of things to be excited about. Hopefully, guys can continue to step up. I'm looking at key players to be able to do their job down the stretch, and this team definitely has a shot. So we'll see how it all plays out, but make sure to subscribe on any podcast platform. Continue tuning in to Boston Balling. Hope you have a great rest of your night. Let's go, Boston. That makes sense. That's a good way to end these shows here. Go, Boston. I'll catch you next time.